Hi everyone, welcome to the virtual 20th annual New Jersey Jewish Film Festival. My name is Vicky Jacobs and I'm the curator for the festival. Let me take the opportunity to thank the co-chairs, Andrea Bergman, Joni Cohen, and Abimeth Kanter, and our fabulous director, Sarah Diamond. Also, thanks to the entire festival committee and all our sponsors, too many to mention. This film is sponsored by Deborah and Wayne Zuckerman and community partners, Congregation Adat Shalom, Temple Beth Shalom, Temple Shalom of West Essex. Thank you to our friends at JCC Central for joining us. Be sure to check the New Jersey Jewish Film Festival website at jccmetrowest.org/NJJFF for updated information. We are adding more Zooms and are discussing New Jersey Jewish films at the JCC Film Discussion Zooms on Mondays at 1:15 p.m. Dear audience, please address all your questions, submit all the questions to the chat box. I had the pleasure of introducing the filmmaker Aviva Kempner, writer, producer, and director of The Spy Behind Homeplate. She's an American filmmaker who has been making independent films since 1979. Her documentaries investigate non-stereotypical images of Jews in history and focus on the untold stories of Jewish people. She's most well known for the film The Life and Times of Hank Greenberg. Also, she has received many awards like the Guggenheim Fellowship for Creative Arts, National Society of Film Critics Award for Best Nonfiction Film, etc. I encourage our audience to Google her and learn more about her life and the other movies she has made. Right now, we are going to focus on The Spy Behind Homeplate. As you can see, Aviva, we gave, your film is on the cover of our brochure and it's our centerpiece film. Great. It is a fascinating story, interesting, informative, and very well told. Actually, some critics have said that you overtold the story, which I didn't mind. You interviewed more than 60 historians, journalists, family members, and it shows your passion for your remarkable subjects. My question to you is, when did you start working for this movie? Because the feature film, The Catcher Was a Spy, based on Mo Berg's life, was made just about the same time. And one of the people interviewed in your film is Nicholas Davidoff, who wrote a book on which the movie Catcher Was a Spy is based. Did you work with him?
Okay, thanks so much for that nice introduction and for you all spending the time to watch a film about who I consider one of the great American heroes. And I always tease, this is the third film I've made with the name Berg in the title. So I obviously have a thing on the Bergs. So let me explain to you how I came to make this film. You know, I make films about underknown Jewish heroes. And there's a wonderful man named William Levine who lives in Phoenix, although in the summer he's in San Diego. So one day I'm having dinner with him and he said, Aviva, I want you to make another sports film. Okay, Bill. And I'll support it, which I really loved hearing. And he said, I'd like you to make a film about Sid Lockman, the famous Jewish football player. I said, I don't like football. Sorry, I won't do it. So then Bill says, well, why don't you make a film about Barney Ross, the Jewish boxer? And I said, well, I hate boxing more, so I'm not going to do it. Thinking, what a fool. Finally, someone's ready to bankroll my whole movie. But then, as they say, the third is a charm. He brought up Mo Berg, and I said, oh, I'd love to. And actually, at the time I was taking Hank Greenberg around, Nick, his cousin, who I know, calls him Nicky, Nikki Davidoff was bringing out the book. So I already knew him. We were sometimes speaking like at Cooperstown at the same time. So I said, oh, of course, I'm going to do it. At the time I started, I did not know the dramatic film was being done, but it has been attempted to be done for many, many years. You see Aviva Miller in my movie, my namesake. She was trying to produce a film on Mo, a dramatic film with the help of Berg. That's how I knew a lot about Irwin. Ray Fox, who you just saw in the film, he had even written a script that Harvey Weinstein was supposed to produce. So that was in the works. But what I'm really grateful for are two filmmakers, Neil Goldstein and Jerry Feldman, who 30 years ago thought they were going to make the documentary. And 18 of the interviews that you saw, I did not shoot. They made the interviews, and actually Jerry Feldman was my director of photography for Hank Greenberg. So I knew this film had been done, or at least the interviews had been done, and they were sitting. Sorry, they were sitting in the archives at Princeton, right there. You know, you can get all the interviews right there. So if you're going to ask me, did I interview William Colby? No, and many of his fellow players. So when I decided to do the movie, I went back to Jerry, who I knew, and Neil Goldstein, and said, can I please use these interviews? And, you know, we made a financial arrangement. I did. And Princeton gave me the chance to do it. What's interesting is, out of nowhere, I found out that the dramatic film was being done a year before my film was coming out. So what are you going to do? It is supposedly based on Nicholas Davidoff's book, but it took all these liberties. And I really think that it really did a disservice to Mo's story. And as you see, Nicholas Davidoff agreed to be filmed in my movie. And I think that's a big problem when you have books that are historical, are biographies, and then they decide to make dramatic films, and they just make these things up. The biggest two distortions are, one, if you see the movie, is they have a shootout. The big thing about Mo is he never had a shootout. He did this very careful, dangerous, malicious work of spying, but he never was in a shootout. The other thing is, there was one line in Nicholas Davidoff's book where one of the baseball players that Nikki interviewed said that he thought maybe Mo might be gay. One sentence. And since then, I've read where the Hollywood screenwriter, whose name I don't even remember, decided, well, I'm going to make him gay. No one I talked to, or those players he played with, where he talks about, you know, the womanizing, and he liked women, they liked him, and he had this wonderful relationship with Estella, and Estella's son came and was interviewed. So this is a real problem where biographies can be distorted in the dramatic films. As a matter of fact, I have a good friend that was in my film on Rosenwald, who wrote a book on her great-grandmother, Madam Walker. They bought the book, and they made this two-part series for Netflix with complete distortions, and she wrote a big essay that she put all over America, and she and I are going to do a program. So I think that answers your question. There's just so much in that dramatic film that isn't right. I also personally think Paul Rudd is not Mo Berg. I think it should have been John Hamm in a minute. I don't know how many people of you watched Mad Men. And the second thing I'll never forget, Nick, I'm forgetting his last name, but he's with Major League Baseball. They came over to them and said, you know, sort of wanted an affirmation from MLB Pictures. And he said that he looked at the footage, and if you see briefly in the beginning, they have Mo playing baseball. And he said, you know, I can't believe someone's making a baseball movie and they're playing baseball and no one has dirt on their uniforms. I mean, they obviously know nothing about the game. MLB did not have their name on it, and he totally loved my film, helped it, and his name, special thanks is at the end. So we actually got an affirmation. So it's something I have to live with, that I still think there's room to have a dramatic film about Mo, but what I really would love to see is a series about the OSS, because I think, and that's why we spent time, and I wanted to spend time to talk about what the OSS is, because, not only was it a secretive organization, but it was so short-lived. A lot of people really don't know how it functioned, and luckily there was all this great Hollywood footage, so sort of OSS training footage intertwined with the feature footage, the spy footage.
Right. Sarah has questions from the audience.
Could I just say a couple more things about the
Sure.
making of the film? Okay, so, it was very special for me to also make the film because I'm a big baseball fan. I live in Washington, and what we call the Nationals were actually the Senators way back when. The reason they're not called the Senators is we don't have voting rights, but hopefully after November, that will pass where we do, and then maybe we'll even go back to the Senators' name. But what was really great is the last time we made it to the World Series was in '33 when Mo was on the team. And Memorial Day weekend last year, I know the learners who own the team, they let me play an excerpt of the film when the film was opening up Memorial Day weekend. And after then, the team started winning. So I always say Mo gave a good karma to us winning the World Series. The other thing is, now, did you play the film all the way to the end? I hope, or it was up to the people watching it.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so at the end, my family tradition is always having my nieces at the end of the film, so that sort of explains that. They're all Czechoslovaks. In all my films, because I live in Washington, I always try to have someone that represents Washington in the films. So in Hank Greenberg, there were the brothers, Levin brothers, Sandra and Carl, who were totally idolized Hank, and it totally made sense. When it came to Gertrude Berg and the Goldbergs, I happened to go to the French embassy and I saw Justice Bader Ginsburg there. This was before she was being called RBG. And I went up to her and I said, listen, I'm making this film on Molly Goldberg. She said, oh, I used to watch it. I loved it, just like I loved reading the Nancy Drew books. So I was able to interview her, and I had originally trained as a lawyer, but I didn't pass the bar. I always thank the DC bar for making me a filmmaker. So after I filmed RBG, I write that night to everyone I know that Aviva finally made it to the Supreme Court. She just did it her way. So that was fun. And then, of course, with Rosenwald, I was able to interview John Lewis, who had gone to a Rosenwald school, and Danny Davis, who was himself a Chicago congressman. So when it came to Mo Berg, I thought, oh my gosh, here I'm sitting in Washington. Certainly there's someone I can interview. And it turns out I know Susan Blumenthal, Dr. Blumenthal, who's married to Ed Markey. And I think, we didn't quite have an ending, but I think he just, nails it at the end. And especially referring to Mo's father, because to me, I can't imagine all those years at Princeton when he played, growing up playing, but all those years in Major League, both playing and being a coach, his father never saw one game,
Right.
which I think is the great psychological heaviness on Mo's life and heart. And when Ed or Senator Markey delivers the line, even though his father wanted him to be Supreme Court Justice, what Mo really loved was a patriot. And I think in this time today, the other thing that's really important to me is knowing how important languages were. I know that my dad was sent from the Pacific to Berlin to work for the military government, where he met my mother, a Holocaust survivor, where I was born, because he knew 6 languages. And he had come from the old country in the late 20s or early 30s, whatever it is. And again, you have Mo growing up, this linguist. You have Corva, who led him in the OSS in Italy, knowing all these languages, being of Sicilian birth. And, we talk about deporting immigrants, but God forbid anything happens now, or the kind of surveillance we're doing in Iran, or you name the country. It's because we have people in this country who know languages from their upbringing. And it's a really important, I think it's one of the most important tools. And then just like the little things, like they made sure that the shoes looked like German shoes. Or there was a scene in the spy movie where, by the way the person ate, gave up, whether he was American or not. It's these little intricacies. I happen to be fascinated by spy movies. So that's a lot that what I learned. The other thing is, I cannot believe that Truman was really kept completely secret about the Manhattan Project. Although ironically, he's the one that okayed the bombs being, delivered on Japan. I mean, I learned a lot in terms of making the film that is still fascinating. And I would have given anything to have met Mo Berg. I mean, can you imagine sitting there in the bullpen and hearing your fellow player tell you how Mussolini's, going to be invading? And then during the winter, when I went to France or when I went to Berlin, and what I saw. And then today I went to visit my family. We're only going to each other's houses. And I had a bunch of newspapers around me. My brother said, "Is that your paper or my paper?" And I said, "Johnny, I'm just like Mo. It's my paper, and they're still alive, and you can't have any of them." So, knowing the movie, he laughed. And then let me just end with one story in terms of making the film. So I wanted very much, I mean, of course, the outstanding story is the Switzerland story, and going after Heisenberg and the courage that Mo displayed with that, and wearing the German shoes that were too tight. But Italy, how successful he was, partly the language skills and the smartness. But how did I find Ferry's son? Turns out I went to my cousin's wedding and I saw a family member there, a friend of the family, and I told Art, "This is what I'm working on." He said, "Oh, I know his son. You got to call him." So always talk about what you're doing. And the last story about that is Mo did not bring Ferry back to the States. He was still assigned to Italy. So another OSS person did it, and he brought him through Casablanca. So how many people beside myself is Casablanca their favorite film, or at least the favorite war film, right? As a matter of fact, I think they went to Rick's. So in any event, they come back to the hotel room, this OSS person, and here the scientist that's going to be so valuable, rocket sciences for America. And their papers and their money was stolen, but not the box of all his research that was so key for us. So they brought him, they flew him on an Army plane. They get into New Jersey, as a matter of fact, I think it was Newark, and they called in the White House, and he, FDR cleared him, and that's probably what caused him to say, "I hear the catcher is still catching very well." I always find that's just such a fascinating story. It'll be in the bonus features. Not everything can make it to the movie.
Thanks for sharing all this information. That's why we love the film.
Thank you.
We learn so much.
Right.
So here's a question in the chat box from Abby Cantor. Were there no interviews with Mo Berg available for inclusion in the film?
We were, this man was a recluse after the war. We used everything we could, which was basically him talking about baseball with kids, and some interviews. There just wasn't. I assure you, if it was there, if we could have found it, we could have used it. And it has to do with something that's going to be in the bonus features. After the war, just like Ira Burkhouse said, every time they saw him, they'd say, "Hey, Mo, what did you do during the war?" And he'd always go, "Shh, I can't talk about it." So finally, I think Mo was just sick and tired of everyone keep on saying, "Mo, what did you do during the war?" He agreed to meet with a book agent. So he goes to meet him for lunch, or maybe it was a representative actually from a publishing company, and they sit down for lunch, and the guy says to him, Well, tell me, what does it mean to be part of the Three Stooges? For some reason, this idiot had thought he was Moe of the Three Stooges, and no one had like briefed him. Moe gets up, walks out, and we never had an autobiography. This is the closest that you'll ever have to Moe Berg's autobiography. Well, I mean, there's biographies, but at least on film. So I assure you, we looked high and low. As a matter of fact, as we speak, there's still someone on to finding out even one more thing that Moe did that I'm supposed to meet with her next week. Of course, social distanced. And if she has the facts, it'll be something for the bonus feature because I'm going to interview her. So.
I received this email today. Moe Berg wasn't a Hall of Fame catcher, but got a lot of attention domestically and internationally for being cultured and intelligent. So how is his rapport with Hall of Fame catchers of the time, like Bill Dickey, Mickey Cochrane, and Gabby Hartnett? Were they jealous of Berg?
You know, I don't know if they were jealous. I think there was a lot of mutual respect, you know, especially later on when Moe was a coach. You know, with Hank, he definitely lost 4.5 years of his career playing baseball, just like DiMaggio and Ted Williams went to 2 wars, and Bob Feller and Yogi. With Moe, he had been 5 years already a coach. He would have become a manager. So there was a great sacrifice. Plus, it was really dangerous. If they had caught Moe, not only would they have discovered he's an American, but of course Jewish because he's circumcised, and eventually they would have figured out he was in the papers. There is no way today someone of that, you know, known could be a spy like that. So I don't know. There's not like one, you know, it's interesting with Hank's story because he did a book called My Life with Ira Berkow. There's great stories about his exchanges with Ted Williams and mutual respect. The most we have of what other players thought about Moe and the respect are the ones the interviews I used. So, and it's interesting because Eldon Ocker, who was a pitcher, talks about, you know, how it was to be with Moe. And I had actually interviewed him for Hank Greenberg. But little did I know back then that I was later on going to make a film about Moe Berg.
Thank you. Muriel Woolid once says, I was surprised that all 3 siblings never married. Do you think their father's attitude had something to do with that?
The most asked question, and with Hank Greenberg it was, are any of his kids Jewish? So to go with the siblings, Aviva Miller told me a story about Sam Berg, that when he was in Japan, you know, doing the research on the devastating effect of the 2 bombs on Japanese citizens, is a lot of it was also birth defects. And that she felt when he came back to the States, he was afraid to have children. With his sister, she had a relationship, actually someone who had come from the old country. It didn't work out. And I think she also had emotional issues. My feeling with Moe is Estella was the love of his life. When he came back, he wouldn't commit to her before he left. And when he came, and I know he had something, a relationship in England, but I could never track down anyone to talk about it. But when he came back somewhat a broken man. And I don't know if you ever saw Plenty with Meryl Streep, but it's about a woman who's in the resistance and comes back, and she can't adjust to life not at war. And I think that was a combination of Moe, and that also had to do with, you know, being able to have relationships. Is my take on it all.
All right. Thank you. Eve Mandel wants to know, do you know which Princeton Eating Club invited him to join?
No, but it's interesting that you say it, because Shirley Povich's daughter-in-law, or the wife, her name is also Connie Povich. She's the wife of David Povich, who's in the film, said that her father went to Princeton and he also faced the anti-Semitism. I don't know which one it was. It was probably connected to the baseball team, but I don't know the name. And if I did, I certainly don't remember it.
Along the lines of that, June Scheckner asks, did Mo not like NYU, or what got him to go to Princeton? Was it a Jewish thing? They didn't accept him until he proved his baseball prowess.
No, I think he just started at NYU first, but you know, he's very bright and brilliant, and obviously Princeton had a great classics department. That's what Mo was interested in, language and classics. And he got in, and they had a better baseball, you know, a higher level baseball team, which he hoped would take him and did take him all the way to the major leagues.
How long, Susan Halpin writes, how long did this film take to produce from beginning to end, including all the research?
A little over 3 years, but that's because I didn't have to fundraise. Hank Greenberg took me 13 years. I always call it my Bas Mitzvah film. But I also started a Jewish film festival in Washington and did other things. But, you know, that's why having angels like William Levine are heaven. And he's actually asked me to now make another film with him. So I don't know if you all know about Ben Hecht, who was the great newspaper man in Chicago, and then one of the great screenwriters of everything from Notorious to Scarface to Underworld. He even does a script doctor on Gone with the Wind. Ghost wrote Marilyn Monroe's autobiography. Did a lot of, like I said, screwball comedies. But then he was approached by the Bergson Group after it was realized that 2 million of our people had been murdered in Europe, and he became very involved in trying to do pageants and do big newspaper articles condemning and trying to get you know, the American government to do something about saving Jews. So that was the War Refugee Board, which was established, but way too late and did not do enough. And then he worked very hard to agitate how Britain wasn't allowing Jews to get into Palestine. Again, did a pageant, which, by the way, Marlon Brando was in. And he irritated the British government so much that Britain banned his movies, and it really hurt his career. One of the most brilliant writers ever, and prolific, as well as, you know, a real champion for saving Jews out of Europe.
Thank you. Ava and Steve want to know, how did a player that week get picked for the All-Star Tour?
Well, because he had gone to Japan the year before. The other guy dropped out, and then, you know, if you're going to choose someone, you might as well choose someone who knew a little Japanese. Although, as he told Babe Ruth, well, I didn't know, you know, back when we left Seattle, but I knew it by the time I came.
Yeah, that was
So
2
when he
weeks ago.
wasn't dancing with Babe Ruth's daughter, he was learning Japanese, and that's actually true from one of the pursers. I love those scenes on the ship. That's really the Gomez's that, you know, gave us the his daughter. The family was very nice about giving us the footage for free, and I think it just captures just the last moment before everyone was going to war.
Thank you. Now they ask, I was told that Sam Berg was very much in love with a Gentile woman, but did not marry her because of her religion, even though the family was not religious.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, thank you. Judy Cantor writes, how did Berg live after the war? Did he have a pension? Did he have money from his baseball career, or did his siblings support him?
Basically, the siblings supported him. He sort of did. I mean, he should have been going into the CIA, but he did not. He was brockus. He just had disputes with the OSS. They said his paperwork wasn't well documented. Now, excuse me, if you're a spy, are you going to keep your hotel receipts in your pocket? I mean, it's the most Michigan thing I ever heard. So that really affected, and he didn't get along with Dulles, who had been the head of the bureau in Switzerland, where he committed, I think, the most courageous, you know, act, the Heisenberg story. So I supposedly he did something for Golda Meir, but we could never find any clear documentation. And oftentimes where you see his picture mentioned, etc., they'll say that he was, he had been flown in and fought with Tito, and he was ahead for a while for the Yugoslav Bureau and the OSS, but he never went in. As a matter of fact, there's footage that was identified at the National Archives, Mo and Tito, and I remember calling, Erwin, his cousin. I said, "Oh, I got this footage of Mo," and it wasn't Mo, and he was smoking. So, mythology is a big, oftentimes happens in sports anyhow, but I don't think you even have to mythologize Mo. He did so many things that were credible and known to make him a hero. I don't think you have to keep on doing that.
Okay. Harriet Klein writes, did you find any evidence that Mo ever experienced any overt anti-Semitism from fans or players in any of the cities where he played?
It's interesting you say that because, of course, if you saw my Hank Greenberg story, I documented fellow players, his own players on his team, the ones against him, as well as the stands. Mo did not have that except for the story at Princeton itself. I just didn't find evidence for it. And, I certainly was looking for it.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for Aviva? No.
I can talk about the other two films I'm working on.
Sure. Tell us. What are you working on?
Well, first I'll talk about the short, and then I'll end with the one that's gonna, the third act's being written this week. So being of a growing age, I am always, my life is very determined the fact that my sleep patterns, et cetera, by the fact I go to the bathroom a lot, for lack of any other explanation. So I started thinking, boy, how do people act in this kind of situation? And I don't know if you saw the scene in Hidden Figures because of racism. The black mathematician had to go to a bathroom, as my dad would say, in your hoop, it's far away. And they would get mad at her because she would take so much time, although I don't think the story is actually true. So way back among my degrees, I have a degree in urban planning. And the whole fact of the matter is when they built the Capitol, they never thought women would be in the House of Representatives or in the Senate. So they never built female bathrooms by either one. So if there's a House vote or a Senate vote, for decades, women had no close place to go to the bathroom. So it's an issue of potty parity, or as they call it, exclusionary architecture. So I'm doing a short film documentary called Pissed Off, and how the women had to fight to have equality in having access to bathrooms nearby. So I'm hoping to have it done next year in time for our first female vice president. And
how about have it ready for our next festival?
Well, when's that?
Well, it's in March. We'll see.
It all has to do with fundraising. Maybe we'll see. But I'd like to have it ready soon after the inauguration. And then the thing that I started working on 4 years ago, I had been a Vista volunteer and gotten very involved in Native American issues. And I came here to go to law school because of that. And I worked somewhat with national Native American organizations. And then I got the Jewish bug and decided the last 40 years to make films about Jewish heroes. But I was approached 4 years ago to work on a film already in progress by two African-American filmmakers, one of which is an ESPN columnist and someone who's on radio and TV often, Kevin Blackistone, to make a film about Native American mascotting and the insidious use of mascotting, or names. So I said only if my writing partner, I had already written a dramatic script about a Navajo activist that I had been very close to and had died in a shootout in New Mexico. So Ben West and I are co-directing a film called Imagining the Indian. And we had just completed 3 weeks ago a website, Imagining the Indians, and with a 3-minute trailer, and all hell finally broke loose about the Washington football team, which was one of the focuses of our film. My understanding, the next 2 days, that Dan Schneider has finally been shamed into changing a name that has always been a racial slur to Native American people. I mean, to me, it's like an extension of my film on Hank Greenberg. And then we'll see, I think, changes in Cleveland with the team there, and with the Braves with the Tomahawk Chop, and also their name. I think Chicago hockey team and the Kansas City Chiefs are going to go slower, but as we like to tease, first of all, it's 3 guys and I hate football, but I'm working on it because of the important topic. But we always say it isn't a coincidence that 2 African Americans, a Native American and a Jew, are making a film on this topic, whose people have suffered both from slavery and genocide. So I'm real proud about that. And if you go to Imagining the Indians, you can see the project. And this week I'm going to be hitting up all the corporations I can and all the firms that represent Native Americans, because we still need funding. It was a casino tribe. They came in at the first as California one as our executive producer, but as you know, people aren't going to casinos now because of the virus, so they sort of had to revamp their support. So I'm back to fundraising, which is, if anyone has a contact with Ben and Jerry's or Newman's salad dressing, I'd love to know, because to me, those are 2, possible groups. And I'm very proud to do that because, not only did I love making the film on Julius Rosenwald, I've always sort of been involved politically, but in making that film, I really got inspired at how important tzedakah or tikkun olam is. And, those are things I like to do in my own life, as you can see probably from my dedications in the film. And actually some of the bonus features of Rosenwald, especially one that shows how President Wilson showed Birth of the Nation at the White House and complimented it while Julius Rosenwald was trying to ban it from Chicago. That 10-minute work in progress, bonus feature is being used in a campaign to change a high school here named Wilson High School. So all of this keeps me very busy, but I can recommend some Netflix films. Did you all see Unorthodox? You want to raise your hand if you all have seen it?
Of course.
Yeah, and then there's one I just watched that I just loved. It's not Jewish, but just great historical fiction. Bonfire of the Destinies. It's sort of like Downton Abbey meets Les Miserables meets this Triangle Shirtwaist Fire. And then there's another one, Land Girls, about young women when London was being bombed, who went to the countryside and worked with the landed gentry and what happened during World War II.
Right, that I saw.
Yeah. Except there's a cliffhanger at the end. I won't tell you what it is, but there is some spying in it, spy stories.
Good.
So what else do you have coming up, movie-wise, in terms of the festival?
Sarah, let me get the
Our
schedule.
next film that we'll be watching is Viral, Anti-Semitism and 4 Mutations. After that, we're watching The Mover. We're watching, I just went blank. We have so many films.
But could you do me a favor and send me several programs, because I'd like to send it to Erwin Berg and my editor and associate producer, because thank you for putting it on the cover. And since he was a New Jersey boy, it makes even more sense.
Absolutely. We'll be very happy to send those to you. Thanks.
You want the hardcover brochures or the email, the downloaded one?
Both, but I'd like about 5 for the hardcover.
Absolutely, not a problem.
Great.
Like more than 5. All right, well, thank you so much.
Yes,
thank you for joining us. Thank you all for coming.
And thanks for programming Jewish films, watching them, supporting them. In a time like today, I think culture is very important to us all, don't you think?
Absolutely. Before you go, the founders of our festival, Karen and Herb Ford, their son, Josh,
are you the Josh's parents?
they are here. They are in. So
Are you Josh's parents? I'm a big fan of your son's both artistic ability and also his playwriting. I assume you're Josh's parents?
Not me. Is Karen still online?
Yeah, unmute yourself, Karen and Herb.
Yes, we're here. Yes, we're Josh's parents.
Okay, well, give him my best. And
by
the
way,
way,
Can I ask a question?
Festival, that's the reason we have our film festival.
okay, great. Well, San Francisco inspired me. And by the way, the painting behind me is my mother's self-portrait. After she became an artist, it's, Helen Kavinsky. You can look her up on the internet. So that's her self-portrait right behind me. That's why I like to have it in my background.
Sarah, can I ask a question?
Sure, let's have one last question.
Okay. First of all, Aviva, one of my cousins died in the Triangle Shirt Factory. But I have a question, and I don't know if it's something you can answer, so I will ask it anyway. Did you see the plot against America, and what did you think of it?
Yeah, it's interesting because for every film you feel like, if only I had gotten an interview with. So I wanted so much to film Philip Roth, but he died before I could get to him. I found both the whole premise and the film very engaging and disturbing. And what it really impressed me, and I sort of do it already in Berg, is how they learned about the war was not TV and not the internet, but going to the movie theater. So after I saw the whole series, I called, and of course they mentioned Hank Greenberg, listening to him on the radio, because Philip Roth was a big baseball fan. I called my editor and I said, this is sort of like a plot technique we're going to have to use with Ben Hecht, because as you start seeing what's happening, from the newsreel, what's happening. I mean, it's a very frightening story, and I thought they did a really good job. Although the way it ended, where she rejected the sister, it's a toughie. I mean, I understand why, but it's still family. So, and I thought the actors were really good, especially the parents and the boys too. So, and Turturro's always really good. So I found it really interesting and disturbing at the same time.
Right. Thanks again very much.
The Hunters, I couldn't get through. I don't know if you all did, but that one I did. And the other one that's interesting is World on Fire, which actually has some Jewish subplots, but I found it really good. The British, Polish, French story. So, but listen, Ben Hecht's Notorious, oh God, what a movie. You think Casablanca's good? As far as I'm concerned, I spend all weekend watching TCM, for either movies that that Ben Hecht wrote, or who was making movies at the same time. As a matter of fact, he's not credited, but he did do some final work on Stagecoach, and I finally saw it. How many of you watched Avalon, where the brothers are sitting there saying, what was the name of the movie named Stagecoach? And they say Stagecoach. No. What's the name of the movie about the stagecoach? Stagecoach. Well, I finally saw it the other day. It's a good movie. And I almost can predict what lines Ben Hecht had. Most importantly, I hope you're all wearing masks and staying safe.
Thank you. We do.
Thank you.
And counting the days until November.
We do the same.
Yes.
Thanks again, Aviva. It was such a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
There's my exit. Someone's still trying to get me.
Thank you so much.
Great.
All right.
See you
Everyone's
tomorrow,
unmuted. We can
Sarah.
say goodbye.
See you tomorrow, Sarah, to
Yes.
discuss an irrepressible woman.
That's correct. At 1:15 tomorrow, we're discussing An Irrepressible Woman. For those of us who want to join the GCC
That's
Metro
the
West Film
movie.
Discussion Group.
You already saw it.
And everyone else have a wonderful night.
Yeah,
Thank
the
you
French
so
movie.
much.
The
You gotta
crazy
go
French
watch
movie about the crazy
Viral.
French lady.
Oh, and Abby wants to say.
No, I just want to
we-
say bye.
Oh, bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye,
everyone.
everybody. We'll see you
Stay
soon.
safe. Be
Bye.
well.
Bye.
Bye.